Welcome in, everybody, to the DJ Preps Football Preview Show. Week 2 is here. I'm your host, Brad Locke of the Daily Journal. And we're still doing this shoestring style, so apologies. But if you haven't watched before, what we're going to do is going to look at 3 of the bigger games this week, break them down, and I'll make a prediction on each game. We're brought to you by Pizza Doctor. Check them out, Midtown Point in Tupelo. Also check out my podcast, Prep Rally, every Wednesday. You can find it in iTunes, Spotify, any of those podcast apps. And follow us on Twitter at DJournalPreps. Okay, so let's go back and look at last week real quick. I didn't do so great on my picks. I went 1 and 2. But you know, the first week, you got to work out the kinks, knock the rust off. Feeling much better about this week, although we have some tough games to pick, certainly. Some big games, some big rivalry games. Let's start with game number 1, Houston at Shannon. Good news, Shannon's field is now ready for action. Had to play at ICC last week because the new surface wasn't quite good to go, but they'll be at Shannon Friday night. Both teams coming off big wins in week 1, and so let's look at the keys to the game, 3 keys. The third one, of course, always the most important. Key number 1, it's a rough time. It was a rough time for Shannon last week in a good way because Keegan Ruff, their running back, had a big night. And so key number 1 is Houston needs to contain him. He rushed for 154 yards and, 2 touchdowns on 5 carries. That's like 30 plus yards a carry. So he's the lead horse in the backfield there for Shannon. Key number 2, secondary role. Shannon's defensive backs against Houston's wide receivers who averaged over 36 yards per catch last week. Guys like Jaden Knox and Chris Parker who can both run it and catch it. And they got a new quarterback in there, but he did pretty well last week. So the defensive backs for Shannon, led by Jaden Dilworth, pretty strong group, so that's a big matchup to watch. And key number 3, again, the most important key, the most relevant, really. Old arms. Hey, who can throw the ball farther, Ken Tops or Baylor Dampier? Ken Tops, of course, the Shannon coach. Dampier, the Houston coach. Both played quarterback in high school. So I don't know how much game they have left, but I am curious who could throw the ball farther. Might give Ken the edge on that one. They should do a little competition before kickoff Friday night. I don't know. Okay, my prediction, a tough one. Shannon looks like they have a really good roster and obviously played well in that big win over Aberdeen. This is a different animal, though, with Houston. Usually pretty tough on defense, but I'm taking Shannon to pull out a close one, 24-17. Game number 2, Ripley at Kossuth. A couple of teams coming off season opening losses in which the offenses struggled for both squads. Key number 1 to this game. Well, like I said, the offense. A pointed concern is scoring points for both teams. They combined for 13 points last week in their losses. Ripley lost to Charleston. Kossuth lost to Baldwin. So they got to find some offense. But key number 2, get turned. If the offenses don't get clicking, then the defenses have to make something happen. So turnovers could be huge. If one of the defenses can force a turnover deep in the other team's territory, shorten the field for your offense, that could make a huge difference in the game. Key number 3, there's an all-name team guy on Kossuth's roster. You may remember a couple of weeks ago I did the all-name team, 10 best names in the area among high school football players. Kossuth has a guy named Memphis Bean. He was on that list. So that's something. There you go. And my prediction, Kossuth 13, Ripley 12. Once again, I picked against Ripley. I did that a few times last year. It didn't go so well for me. Don't hate me, please, Ripley. Okay, the third game, West Point and Starkville, another big rival game. West Point coming off a 1-point loss to Louisville, and Starkville pretty handily beat Noxubee County last week. But this should be a close possibly low-scoring game. Key number 1, roughing it, New Starkville quarterback Jalen Ruffin had a very productive debut against Noxubee County, passed for 201 yards and 3 touchdowns in that win. So he had some good help with the running game, but if he can continue playing that way, it gives them a great shot. Key number 2, run Randall. Running back Cam Randall leads the West Point rushing attack. And of course, that's what West Point does best. They run the ball. And they ran it pretty well against Louisville, 176 yards against a pretty stout defense. But Coach Brett Morgan believes they can and need to do even better than that this week against Starkville. And then key number 3, food fight. Who has the better restaurant? Anthony's in West Point or Restaurant Tyler in Starkville? I've eaten at Restaurant Tyler many times. Delicious. Haven't tried Anthony's yet, but I've heard great things. So I don't know who wins that battle, but I feel like it would be close, as will be this game. And my prediction, went back and forth on this, but ultimately I'm going with West Point on the road, 21-20 over Starkville. So there are your 3 big games to watch this week. Many others being played, and we'll be covering several of those games. Look for our coverage in Saturday's Daily Journal and at djournal.com. Follow us again on Twitter at djournalsports. I'm on there at Brad Locke. And before we go, one more thing, and I did this last time we had the show, the Double Trouble Award, the best duo from the previous week. In week 1, it was the Hamilton duo of Kaiser Werner and Trent Jones. Those 2 running backs combined for 331 yards and 5 touchdowns. Both running backs. Werner had 201 rushing. Jones had 130. And Jones also had a kickoff return for touchdown. So congrats to those guys, and they beat Bakersfield 50-24. And that's it. Thanks for joining me for these few minutes to look at week 2 of high school football. I guess I'll see you again next week.